Yeah, so we have been joined by Richard and Eli from Manila. Are you both in Manila right
Yes.
now? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So, and if you're just joining us now, this is 24 Hours of UX coming to you live from across the globe. I happen to be physically located here in Switzerland, as is Peter. Jeff just joined us from Barcelona, and we've had talks from Brisbane and Wellington, Hungary, Munich. The list goes on. It's going very well. If you do encounter any sort of technical difficulties with the stream, sometimes it's useful to reload your screen. There is a chat for the event so you can ask Richard and Eli questions as they present, and I believe you guys will have some time to spare where you can answer those questions. I'll try to keep track of them as we go through it as well, because it can be difficult to follow in the chat. And then after this session, after this talk here on the stage, Richard and Eli will be traveling over to their session for Manila, which is available on the left side of your screen on the sessions button, at which point you can continue the conversation with them. You can even, there are about 20 slots where you can actually go and have a Zoom-like experience and discuss face-to-face. There's also networking, so at any time during the day you can jump into networking and meet other people sort of on a random basis who are attending from all over the world. Right now we have over 1,000 people watching at this very moment. And so without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Richard and Eli. Just one quick word before you guys begin. Thank our sponsors again. Really grateful that Adobe and UX Testing have sponsored this event, really enabled us to build a global community out of local communities. And that's really what's going on here. We're all learning from each other today. While Peter and I have been sort of organizing this behind the scenes, we haven't seen the content yet. So we're really excited, just like everybody else. So thanks for going on this UX journey with us today, and I'll turn over the floor to Richard and Eli.
And Richard and Eli asked something from us, so I'll point that out, that I have pinned to the top of the chat a menti.com question page. So actually, as the chat is going on for Philippines, you can ask the questions on this menti.com URL. So just click on it and ask a question, and then they will be able to see all your questions, in a separate thing for here, but also to handle during the session. And Jesse mentioned a session where 20 people can join via audio and video, but a lot more can listen in and or give their thoughts in a chat format as well. And those 20 seats of video and audio sharing will be switched between the people. So don't be alarmed. Feel free to go there as well. It's all of us can fit. And now, yeah, over to you guys.
Right. Thanks, Peter. So Richard and I are part of the UX Philippines, UXPH, we call it. User Experience Philippines is a Filipino nonprofit organization that hosts the largest network of design professionals, enthusiasts, and students in the Philippines. Our mission is to grow and nurture the Filipino creative community through our events and meetups that we organize in collaboration with industry experts from local and international organizations like this one, in collaboration with 24 Hours of UX. And we are actually having an online conference later on this year. If you'd be interested to give a talk or partner with us, please reach us at partnerships@uxph.org or outreach@uxph.org. Now, representing us from the Philippines, I'd like to welcome Richard Paraino, who will be discussing the conversational assistants in the time of coronavirus. Take it away, Richard.
All right, give me a minute. I'm just going to share my screen. Sige. All right, so everyone should be seeing my screen right now. So before we formally start, I'd just like to thank everyone for coming to this session. Good morning to those watching from the Americas and from Europe, and good evening to those watching from Southeast Asia. I think this is, I think around dinner time for everyone here. So really, thank you for taking time out of your day and joining us here on 24 Hours of UX. All right. So today I'm going to be talking about conversational assistants and designers in the time of COVID-19. I have three important topics that I'm going to be talking about. First, I'm going to talk about what exactly are conversational assistants, because it's not really a common term for you to hear in the design scene. And second, I'm going to talk about what role conversational assistants played in the present and what role they could play in a post-COVID-19 society. And lastly, which is, I think, which is a hard topic to discuss in this time, I'm going to be talking about the role of designers and technologists in a post-COVID-19 society. All right. So moving forward, I'm just going to introduce myself real quick. Hi, my name is Richard, and I am a Filipino conversation designer and product design consultant. Currently, I do conversation design and product management at Senti AI. Aside from my day job, I'm also very active in the tech community. I'm part of the events team in UX Philippines, and I'm also the community lead of the Philippine Web Designers Organization. So shout out to those two organizations if anyone from you guys is watching right now. And just a fun fact, for you to get to know me a little better. I also run Discord server with my friends called Tambayan 404. So it's essentially a very low pressure environment. We made it for Filipino designers, engineers, tech people to just mingle with each other and remember to de-stress, especially in these very, very different times to what we're used to. All right. Wait. All right. So just a quick icebreaker for everyone in the chat. I have four main questions for you. I'll just as a note, this isn't a formal survey. This is just meant for everyone to start talking to each other and hopefully interact with each other in the chat. So my first question for you is, have you used chat or voice assistants in the past? Second, how's your general experience with them? Third, what's your use case for these assistants? And fourth, during quarantine, did you end up using these assistants more? So if you have an answer to those questions, I'd really appreciate it if you send it in the chat, because we're going to be discussing that in the breakout session later after the Q&A. All right. So let's start with the main talk. What are conversational assistants? A conversational assistant is a chat or voice assistant meant to enhance rather than replace the skills and functions of the person that it's assisting. And I will be sharing more examples of conversational assistants later. But in simpler terms, conversational assistants are chatbots, your voice bots, your Google Assistants, Amazon Alexas, and essentially those types of technologies. I have three main points for what makes a conversational assistant a conversational assistant. First is that it communicates naturally with the user. And most importantly, the technical terms and jargon is very minimal compared to some chatbots that we've most likely interacted with before, where they have very technical, very long form responses, and conversing with those bots feels like you're trying to push a rock against the wall. So essentially, conversational assistants are more natural to converse with, and even though it's not 100% possible to converse with a conversational assistant like a real person, it's very close to that experience. Second, a conversational assistant understands the user's intent without the user saying explicitly what they want to achieve. compare this to the more traditional chatbots that we're used to, where when you open it up, you're pretty much railroaded into a conversation flow. All the options are predefined, and if you try to reply on your own, the chatbot starts breaking. That's one of the things that makes it different from a regular chatbot. And third, it avoids long form messages, and it maximizes the voice and chat UI to clearly drive their message to the user. So one of the nice things about conversational interfaces is that you can play around with the quirks, with the limitations of voice and chat interfaces. Like, for example, us humans are some of us are used to sending messages in quick succession, even though it's just one single sentence. And conversational assistants are able to maximize that for full effect, so that they can drive what they want to drive for the users more effectively. And yeah, compared to normal chatbots, conversational assistants don't dump a lot of information in one single message. And I'm sure that some of you have experienced chatbots before, whether it's relatively recently or a long time ago, that there are chatbots that expect you to read a large block of messages, when in reality our instinct as normal people is to not read it at all. Like something like TLDR, essentially. Now, conversational assistants are able to maximize or play around with that human limitation, I would say. All right. All right. Moving on to my next point. Conversational assistants of the past were not really as mature as it is right now. In the year 2020, we enjoy chatbots or conversational assistants that have reaped the benefits of conversation design and advances in natural language processing technology. That wasn't the case in the past. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of key differences between conversational assistants and chatbots. Like, for example, in the past, chatbots were, imagine a chatbot where when you're trying to converse with it, it presents you, it converses with you like it's in a phone operator kind of style. And what I mean by that is that when you're talking to a chatbot, it tells you, type in age if you want to learn your age, and then type in account details if you want to learn about your account details. That kind of behavior is restricted to chatbots of the past. Now that we have conversational assistants, we're able to move past that that honestly primitive way of interacting with conversational assistants, and we're now able to converse with them in a way that somewhat resembles an actual conversation with a person. And most importantly, conversational assistants shouldn't replace the job of the person. This is AI Ethics 101, where the artificial intelligence that you're trying to implement in a certain company shouldn't really replace anyone's job. As I mentioned earlier, conversational assistants should really just enhance what the real person can do in terms of their work, because trying to replace a person's function is, number one, it's not possible at this time, and I doubt it will be possible. And number two, there are just some tasks that people are really much better in trying to do. Like, for example, you can't expect a conversational assistant to replace telemedicine, for example. You can't expect a conversational assistant to do therapy on their patients. In industries that need a timely human touch, conversational assistants are really, really, I would say, worthless, and it's not worth the time and investment in trying to replace those. All right. Next is they should be able to create opportunities for the person to make better use of their time and skills. Connecting to the previous point, the goal is not to replace actual people in a company. The goal is to enhance their capabilities. One example of this is like taking over repetitive information. Let's say there's a small business and they want to integrate a conversational assistant. The role of the conversational assistant is to allow the real person to be able to, let's say, know the stock, or rather the conversational assistant will be the one in charge of telling customers like what's the current stock level of this item. And then the real person, with that task already lifted off of their tasks, they can focus on more important tasks or more technical tasks that actually require a human being in trying to verify it. Like, let's say these connecting to the store example, the human person can be the one to manually check stocks if the system fails, or if there is a question, or if there is a customer question that they're not really able, that the conversation assistant is not really able to answer. That's when the live agents will be going in the picture. And ideally, conversational assistants are part of complete end-to-end systems instead of being novelties and marketing gimmicks. What makes conversational assistants effective is if they're part of full-blown systems that are able to maximize the entire ecosystem of applications to be able to provide value to the actual user. Like, for example, the number one classic example of conversational assistants is Google Assistant, or Apple Siri, or Amazon Alexa. These conversational assistants are part of the entire of their respective ecosystems. And let's say for Google Assistant, you ask it to book or to call and make an appointment for this store. I think it's possible now with the latest version of Google Assistant. Now, since it's a conversational assistant is end to end, you can't you'll be able to expect that you'll do that it's not really a novelty or a marketing gimmick. It's actually able to provide real value to the users who are using it. And here are some really quick examples of conversational assistants. Now, I'm focusing on applications that I have previous experience with, and right now I'm trying to. It's very hard to find chatbots that are independent from Google Assistant, from Amazon Alexa, from Apple Siri, just because of how new of a field conversation design and chatbot development is. All right, so moving forward, our first example here is Bus Uncle, which is a conversational assistant or a chatbot in Singapore. It's mainly used for tracking bus stops and tracking the buses and knowing what time these buses will arrive in the bus stops. Now, there are 5 main points that makes this a conversational assistant like one step higher from a normal chatbot. First is that it understands local cultural references. It's really important for conversational assistants to be tailor fit to the users that you're trying to make them use. And Bus Uncle is really good at doing that local cultural references stuff. Like, for example, in the screenshot here, it responds to the user in local lingo in Singlish. And those little things that you do in the conversation design phase actually has a lot of impact in the overall user experience for the chat assistant. Second is that it has a conversational format. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are some chatbots that just bombard you with options and try to railroad you to certain tasks within the chat flow. For Boss Uncle, it's actually trying to converse with you like you would an actual boss uncle in Singapore. Like for example, in the screenshot, let I say hello uncle, the uncle says and then the user says boss how long, and then the boss uncle responds with where are you, then can you give the street, blah blah blah. So these small things are really have a big impact in terms of providing the user a really good user experience. And the third point is that it maximizes the chat user interface. As I mentioned earlier, the chat conversational assistants really need to maximize the limitations of their user interface. What's different about conversational assistants is that conversational assistants usually play around with chat UIs, voice UIs, as opposed to regular mobile apps or web apps, which have way more space to work with. Now, an example of this in Bus Uncle SG would be the Bus Uncle providing options in a carousel format, which is native to Google Messenger, Facebook Messenger, Google Assistant, and other chat platforms. And being able to maximize these quirks of the user interface provides the user with a really, really nice and really, really straightforward experience, and it increases the overall usability of the chat assistant. Next, it provides users a low-cost, accessible way to access bus stop info. Now, this is really important because in Southeast Asia and in the Philippines alone, even though it's 2020, not every household has access to a phone. Not every household has access to gigabytes of data. Some of them just have normal low-spec Android phones that are able to at least access Facebook Messenger on the free plan. Now, conversational assistants provide they're basically an inclusive way for users to be able to actually use certain services. In the context of Bus Uncle SG, let's say I'm visiting Singapore and I want to save on data. I could just go to Messenger, message Bus Uncle if I'm kind of lost and I don't know how to get to this certain place, as opposed to downloading a 50 megabyte app on the App Store. I could just use what I have right now, which is Facebook Messenger, and then talk with a conversational assistant like Bus Uncle to help me get around the city. Now, that's really important because, as I mentioned earlier, not everyone is able to afford data. Not everyone is able to afford an iPhone or an expensive Android phone. So conversational assistants has the power to democratize access to those technologies. And then lastly, there's a clear set of options and capabilities provided to the user. One important thing about conversational assistants is that even though they look like they're freeform, it's not really freeform. It's actually designed in such a way for you to be led to those specific choices. And for you to be effectively led to those choices, you need to provide the user with information on how to use these conversational assistants. In other chat assistants, like let's say Google Assistant, you can ask Google Assistant, what can you do? And then Google Assistant will reply with the list of actions that you can do. It's very much same here in Bus Uncle SG, where each reply that you do, you're provided with enough choices for you to make your decision, and you're not really restricted to those options, because a conversational assistant is able to derive your intent even though you're not strictly saying the keywords. All right. So for the second conversational assistant that we're looking at today, we're going to look at Wobot, which is a conversational assistant that helps the users with cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, it's pretty much evolved since its Facebook Messenger days, and it has its own app now. But the but the principles remain the same for conversational assistants. First, what makes Wobot conversational assistant is that it understands user intent and responds accordingly. So if you look at the screenshot, you can see that even though there's not many options presented to the user, and that it's really like a conversational interface. You're not supposed to provide the user, press X to achieve Y. It maximizes natural language processing technology to be able to understand user intent, and then it provides the appropriate response when it detects that intent. For the second point, it makes the user feel like they're talking to a real person. Now, if you look at Wobot's website, it's a cognitive behavioral therapy app. Now, I mentioned earlier that you shouldn't try to add a conversational assistant to therapy, but CBT is different in a way that you don't need to have a live facilitator doing it, since it's essentially a set of repeatable questions that you can ask a person. The creators of Wobot decided to digitize the process of performing cognitive behavioral therapy to everyone. And in effect, it reduced the barrier to entry to everyone, because in relation to the last example, not everyone can afford therapy. Not everyone has access to insurance, or not everyone's countries have good public health policies. So apps like Wobot actually democratize and provide users an inclusive environment for them to be able to avail normally expensive technology, and enables them to consume it usually free or at a very, very low price. Now, lastly, it leads the user on how to use the app without using quick reply. Now, that's related to the first point that I raised about the user intents. And really, this is where conversation design shines. Because if you do your research properly, you do your testing properly, and overall you do your design process you do your design process properly, you'll be able to lead the users to specific use cases, or at the very least, identify use cases for the users, and identify use case for the users without providing a quick reply menu like you see in other chatbots or chat assistants. All right, moving on to the next slide. All right, now I'm going to feature a local chat assistant here in the Philippines. Right now we're focusing on Charlie of Cebu Pacific, which essentially handles frequently asked questions. Now, for context, Cebu Pacific is a local airline company, and as expected with local airlines, there are a lot of people asking, what should I do if my flight gets canceled? What am I going to do since if I won't be able to go there because of this whole COVID thing? Will I get a refund? So in this context, Charlie of Cebu Pacific is able to handle those repetitive questions. And actually, you can see here in the screenshot that there's already an advisory posted there by Charlie. It says there's something about quarantine guidelines. There's a quick link to the latest advisory, and then COVID-19 related information. So this is one of the use cases where conversational assistants really shine. It's where if there are repetitive information like frequently asked questions, if there are surveys, this is where conversational assistants provide the most impact, because you're alleviating the live agent with repetitive tasks, allowing them to create a larger impact on the company. All right, so going by the points. First is it helps the live agents answer repeatable information, right? Now, I was talking about this earlier, where conversational assistants are able to provide live agents with it provides live agents an opportunity to focus on other work instead of their day being wasted on replying to the same questions over and over again. Now, second, Charlie of Cebu Pacific maximizes the chat user interface. Now here it's running on its own platform. It's not on Facebook Messenger. It's not on Google Assistant. And yeah, as is the trend with other conversational assistants in the other examples earlier, it maximizes the interface and limitations of the chat UI, and then it plays around with them to provide the user with a very unique chat interface. All right. Now, lastly, it clearly shows what the user can and should do. Now, one important thing about conversational assistants is that you're very clear about what you can and cannot do. This reduces the number of chances for errors to pop up in your chat assistant, and clearly showing what the user can and cannot do can be achieved in a lot of different ways. You can lay out all the options at the start. You can present the information if you're asked what can you do. What's important is that your chat assistant or voice assistant must have a way to be able to show the user what they're able to do and not do. So basically, that's just expectation management on the end of the conversation designer or the chatbot developer in this case. All right, moving forward. And then, of course, you can't have a talk about conversational assistants without talking about Google Assistant, Amazon Alexa, and Apple Siri. So far in the year 2020, these are the most complete and most powerful platforms for conversational assistants to be built on. You don't have to develop new interactions. You can maximize the existing machine learning libraries on Google and Amazon. So, of course, we're going to include that as an example here. Now, there are 4 main points which makes these assistants from the different platforms conversational assistants. First is that they have a very powerful knowledge base. Ideally, having a powerful knowledge base is number one priority, and it's tied into the conversation design, because if you're without a knowledge base, you won't be able to know what you're going to design for the actual conversation flow. Although this is not a reality for a lot of people, because there are a lot of restrictions in terms of actually being able to collect information or being given enough budget to do the research for this. But having a very powerful knowledge base will allow you to basically have a really powerful chatbot, and it will give you a lot of opportunities to work with when you're designing conversations. Now, second, it also converses with the user naturally. Now, these platforms are the pioneers, I would say, or if not the pioneers, they're really the leaders of conversation design right now in the industry. Google Assistant in particular, they published a design guidelines on conversation design. And so far, based on my research, they're the only company to come up with actual conversation design guidelines, like how do you run user testing, how do you do Wizard of Oz, how do you do role play for your research. So Google Assistant is really one of those platforms that really have a really good resource on conversation design, and I encourage you to go to their website and study there if you're interested in becoming a conversation designer. All right. And yeah, they converse with the user naturally, because, like, for example, in the screenshot, there are quick stuff that you can do with the assistant, like how many ounces are in the pound. And then they'll normally reply to you in a very conversational manner, like they're not a robot. And in recent updates, Google Assistant actually reduced the robotic sounding responses as a result of their research in conversational assistants and artificial intelligence. All right. So for the third point, yeah, these platforms clearly show what the user should, and cannot do. So I won't be explaining that further because I've already explained it in the previous slide. And then for the last point, they maximize the use of the platform and the voice or the chat UI. These platforms have an edge because they have native integration with, like for example, Google Assistant has native integration with Android. So these are really, like for example, if you ask Google Assistant to call Richard or something, your assistant will be able to actually call this person on your phone. So that's a really great use of conversational assistants. And since it's quarantine, I think a lot of people have been using their Google Homes to actually change their music, change their lights, or basically just do some quality of life actions with their conversational assistant. All right, now since we're done with discussing these conversational assistants in action, let's take a step back and really discuss conversational assistants in the past, now, and after COVID-19. All right, starting with conversational assistants in the past. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the older conversational assistants or chatbots, they often railroad users into specific tasks. And that's a result of the technology not being mature enough. Conversation design wasn't really a thing yet in the past, even UX design, and natural language processing was still in its early stages as compared to now in 2020. And number two, when people were starting with the concept of chat assistants or chat bots, they're often a carbon copy of existing processes. They just turned it into a chat or a voice format. Now, I'm not sure if you have experience with some of the older chatbots, but usually in the context of collecting surveys, it's just what is your age? And then the user will say his age, and then it's just a back and forth. No personality, no persona integrated into the conversational assistant, and basically it was one of the early attempts to digitize or digitally transform some processes in a chat or a voice interface. Now, lastly, conversational assistants back then didn't really have a fleshed out design influence. As I mentioned earlier, there was no conversation design back then. UX design was mostly focused on UI design or on web apps or on mobile apps. Chatbots or conversational assistants were really in its infancy, and it shows in the really, really old conversational assistants. Luckily, we're now in the year 2020 and we're enjoying the benefits of HCI research, conversation design, and research in NLP. So for the first point, conversational assistants now, they're able to augment skeletal staff of companies by digitizing repetitive information. And this is really important in the context of COVID-19 because, for example, in the Philippines, not everyone is able to work from home. They're going to be forced to go into the offices and provide a skeletal staff for their businesses to keep running. And with conversational assistants, I've seen a lot of conversational assistants now in the local industry that are able to do the tasks of that are normally reserved for full-time staff. And the problem with skeletal staff is that they're not able to keep up with demand. In my experience, some of the computer parts stores in the Philippines respond to messages and inquiries up to 5 in the morning or 4 in the morning just to try and keep up with the customer demand. And conversational assistants, where they really shine, is digitizing repetitive information and taking that task of doing repetitive information from the live agents. Next, conversational assistants are now able to maximize the quirks, the abilities, and the limitations of voice and chat user interfaces. As we've seen in the examples earlier, we can see conversational assistants play around with how the information is displayed in the messenger, regardless of platform. On the third point, there's a greater focus and investment on conversation design. Now, what's really great is that in the year 2020, there's a lot of conversation design resources available in the internet right now. Most importantly, Google's Conversation Design Handbook. When I started looking into conversation design back in 2019, 2018, there was virtually no resource available yet, or if there was any resource, it's not really fleshed out yet. Now, for those planning to be conversation designers, they can reap the benefits of better technology and better research into conversation design. And then for the last point, conversation flows are now more tailor-fit to the users of the assistant. And this is a direct effect of investing in conversation design. With conversation design, you can actually create or identify personas for your chatbots. Before even developing the chatbots, you already have an idea of how the conversational assistant will speak, how it will treat, how it will respond to people. And yeah, conversational assistants right now are really in their golden age as compared to before because of how many advances in technology that we've gained so far. And of course, the increasing number of designers who are going into conversation design. All right, now let's talk about conversational assistants after COVID-19. So there are 4 points where conversation assistants can improve the life of everyone after COVID-19. Starting with the first point, live agents will be more empowered with the help of conversational assistants. We're already seeing this we're already seeing this happen now, but after COVID-19, since the vaccine isn't available yet, live agents' capacity to respond to people will be increased because there's a conversational assistant that's actually assisting them in responding to those repetitive information. And for the second point, voice and chat user interfaces will offer a more inclusive way of interaction for those who are not comfortable with talking to a real person. And like the previous point, we're already seeing that happen right now, but there's more opportunities for more inclusive software after COVID-19. And third, it's very straightforward. Conversational assistants encourage social distancing. In the scenario that you can't call to a store because their phone lines are bombarded, and their messenger personnel are not really responding, you're left with two choices. Either one, go directly to that place and directly ask if they have stock, or number two, you could converse with the conversational assistant set up by the store and ask them, for example, do they have Animal Crossing in stock? Now, this is really important that we encourage social distancing through technologies like conversational assistants, because it doesn't seem like the coronavirus is going away anytime soon. And for the last point, for conversational assistants after COVID-19, businesses will be able to check in on their employees' health at scale. In my experience, there are already a lot of companies who are doing this, who are offering enterprise companies this in the Philippines. They create conversational assistants that automatically, or rather, conversational assistants that collect and process user information at scale. Like, for example, if you want to know the health status of your employees, instead of exhausting your HR personnel and making them message tens of hundreds of thousands of employees, you can use a conversational assistant to handle that task, and you'll be able to understand really quickly the health of your employees at scale. And now we're moving on to the third topic. I hope everyone is still doing good in the chat. I will be responding to your questions later. And if we don't have enough time to respond to the questions in this session, we can move to the breakout session later. All right. Now, let's talk about the role of designers and technologists in a post-COVID-19 society. And I will just say this before I continue. This is a very heavy topic, and it's a very hard topic for designers in particular to talk about. But I can't, in good conscience, do this talk without talking about everything that I will mention in the following slides. Now, COVID-19 has changed society as we know it, and yeah, in the past few months, we've seen businesses close down. We've seen mass unemployment across the world. We've seen systemic inequality in a lot of our governments. We've seen racial injustice, and we've seen police brutality. And COVID-19 basically amplified the gaps in technology, existing systems, and society at large. Now, as designers, our instinct is to ask the big question, how might we? But the thing is, we can't really solve racism, inequality, mass unemployment by asking ourselves that question. Our lives would be so much better if an app was able to delete racism overnight, if an app was able to provide jobs to hundreds of thousands of people overnight. But that's not really possible. There's no app in the world that can ever be made to solve these issues. And that's including conversational assistants, even though that technology is by itself inclusive already. Now, you might be wondering, and I can't really see the chat right now, how is this related to conversation design? Or how is this related to design in general? The reality is we designers are implicit in creating large scale impact as a result of the work that we do for our products. As you can see here in this slide, in 2016, Microsoft created a chatbot that was publicly accessible to everyone, and the internet, being the internet, quickly turned that chatbot into a racist chatbot. And then Microsoft took a step back. They tried to fix it, but the politically correct chatbot they released after was even worse than the racist one. So this could be a possible lapse in design judgment, or a lack of foresight on the end of the company. But we can't escape the reality that we designers have a lot of say in how our technology will be used by others and for others. And yeah, some people say that designers don't really have an impact, that they can't really make a change. They can't change business decisions. They can't change engineering decisions. But there is enough evidence that for us, we really have a big impact in everything. As you can see here on the screen, this is something that a lot of people experience, especially if you have a Latinx background or a Filipino background. Special characters in your name will be blocked by the system because it's designed this way. Let's say your last name is just 2 letters, which is common for people from China. Some certain systems won't be able to accept that because they're not designed in a way to be inclusive and to actually consider these edge cases. Or actually, they shouldn't be edge cases. They should be really part of the main investigation or of the main UX design process. Because what this does is that designers, knowingly or unknowingly, exclude a lot of people from using the technology that they build. And what's the point of being a designer if no one can actually use the things that you design, right? And now here, our role as designers is in a post-COVID-19 society to take a step back, to assess our systems and really think about the impact of our actions. Here in the Philippines, Facebook is being, just last Sunday, Facebook had a there was a lot of dummy accounts made on Facebook, and the design of Facebook wasn't really accommodating for a large number of people to report dummy accounts. And really, these design decisions end up hurting people who use them the most. In which case, a design decision like making it harder to report posts on Facebook negatively impacted the Philippines in terms of not really being able to responsibly use the platform. And yeah, as I mentioned earlier, as designers, we need to take a step back and assess the systems that we are building, whether that's a web app or a mobile app or a chat assistant. All of these platforms are able to be used for racial profiling, for systemic inequality. And these systems, we need to, as the designers, we need to make sure that they're well designed to actually be an inclusive environment and to provide opportunities for everyone to participate in the technology that you're creating. And in the context of conversational assistants, if you create a racist, biased conversational assistant, you're not really doing anything to help the world. You're just excluding everyone from technology that could otherwise give a really big impact to their lives. In a post-COVID-19 world, conversational assistants and designers should not be contributing to systemic inequalities. We are not exempt from what is happening in the world. We need to get out of our bubbles. We need to recognize our privilege and be able to use it to design systems that will benefit everyone in the world. And we should really try our best, exert effort to study about everyone and make sure no one is left out. And that's pretty much it for my talk. Thank you for listening. I won't be promoting myself that much. All I want you to do is hopefully you understood something from my talk about conversational assistants, and hopefully you visit the links on the screen. Visit blacklivesmatter.card.co. Donate to the National Bail Fund at bit.ly, local bail funds. Stand up against injustice and basically support inclusive technology and make sure that the products that we design aren't used to make the situation worse for everyone. And yes, that's it for my talk. If you have any questions, you can ask it right now, I guess.
Hi, Richard. There are a couple of questions on Mentimeter. So how do you draw the line between these definitions, chatbot versus conversational assistant?
All right. So I actually forgot to talk about that earlier. In my experience of designing conversational assistants and chatbots is that the two are really pretty much the same. It's more of how you categorize everything. We can call a chatbot if it's not really automated. There's not really a good focus on design. It's not really wait, sorry. I'm trying to collect my thoughts right now. Yeah.
Okay, man. You were so passionate of what you were sharing.
Yeah, that was a really strong last part.
The chat, they were really cheering you on chat.
And yeah, all right. So just looking at my notes right now, the main thing that makes conversational assistants different from chatbots is that it really doesn't aim to replace the job of the person. It's a common pitfall for everyone, me included, to think that chatbots can replace certain functions in a company. But for it to be really effective, you don't replace the people. You create opportunities for the people to do their work better. Yeah, so that's the main difference between a conversational assistant and the chatbot.
I think we have only a few minutes left, Richard, and I think we can jump into the session later. Jesse, you wanna have a few last few words? Want to say something? Thanks, Richard.
Yeah,
great job, man.
Yeah, Richard, that was great. Thank you so much. I wanted to
Thank you.
today. That was very emotional and really a very thorough presentation with a lot of information for people to digest. Having worked on chatbot, conversational projects myself in the past, I really found it very interesting and very useful to see how things are evolving. So thank you for that. I think it's time for us to wrap up this particular session. There are a ton of questions, obviously, but Eli, I think you can manage those over in the session on the left side of your screen, and it must be that way for everybody watching me. And and great job. Thanks, guys.
We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for everyone.